Thank you, everybody, for joining us for today's WRASAP Network quarterly meeting. My name is Esmeralda Mandujano, and I am with the California AgrAbility at the University of California at Davis. Our program is responsible for hosting this network quarterly meetings for the WRASAP network. And today's presenters are going to be Chad Reznicek, Behavioral Health Specialist from Colorado AgrAbility Program, along with Dr. Fetch with Colorado AgrAbility Program, both of them at the Colorado State University, and they are going to be presenting on advances and barriers in increasing behavioral health support for Colorado farming and ranching families. I will speak a little bit about them, both of our presenters shortly, but first I wanted to give you a brief overview of our program, of the WRASAP program. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So the mission of the Western Regional Agricultural Stress Assistance Program is to serve the ranchers and farm workers that are in the West and to help them at their times of stress. It is a program that's funded by the USDA NIFA, specifically under the Farmer Rancher Stress Assistance Network grant, and it establishes regional networks that connect agricultural producers, including farmers, ranchers, farm workers, and others in the agricultural related occupations with resources to assist them in times of stress. There are 4 regional programs in the United States. If you visit our webpage, farmstress.us, under About, you will find information about each of these 4 programs. Specifically for WRASAP, we serve a region in the west of 13 states and 4 territories. That includes Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, Washington, Wyoming, and also the territories. And in this network, we have a lot of partners, several partners. Some of the core partners include the California AgrAbility, Washington State University, the University of Nevada at Reno, Montana State University, the Colorado AgrAbility Program, the National AgrAbility Program, Farm Aid. The list goes on because it is a network, but these are some of the core participants. WRASAP efforts include a clearinghouse, which builds on a comprehensive searchable database to facilitate easier navigation of resources. It also expands current resources, for example, Farm Aid. They're an organization that mostly started in the East, but with WRASAP, we were able to extend their existing hotline operation hours and train their staff for better support agricultural populations in the West, and also increase the hours, like I mentioned. We also have a small grants program. The small grants program, we take in applications on a quarterly basis. Our last quarter closed on December 31st, and we can take in applications on 3 different areas, including outreach, professional development, and translation. So that is an opportunity that is available to all members and all of anybody that's working with farmers and farm workers in the Western region. And then this part for what we're here today, which is the network, we hope to create a collaboration and expansion of the network to ensure culturally humble community outreach and support to the region. Next slide, please. So to build on to what the network meetings are, these are a space where stakeholders are able to build connections and collaboration to assist agricultural producers in times of stress. Also, another goal of the network meetings are to improve behavioral health awareness, literacy, and outcomes for agricultural producers, their families, and communities. Also, it is a space for collaborators to present their efforts and offer opportunities to pose questions and bring experiences to the table. The meeting is open to the public and to external partners, and I know that we have some community members that have joined in today. Next slide, please. So we're going to start off with an announcement from our collaborator, National AgrAbility Program, Tess McKill. I know she's going to share a slide for us.
Thanks, Esme. All right, let me share my screen. there we go. Okay. All right, so I am going to just remind everybody, for those of you who know, and let people who do not already know, that we are holding an in-person National AgrAbility Training Workshop March 13th through the 17th of this year at the Madison Concourse Hotel in Madison, Wisconsin. So we have over 50 sessions throughout that time period, focusing on assistive technology, veterans, health and safety, and a myriad of other topics. 5 of those sessions are specifically on behavioral health, and one of which is about the FARSAN network, and that is going to be on Wednesday from 9:10 to 9:55 a.m. So just some dates to keep in mind. Our hotel block closes February 10th. So if you do not get your hotel reservation before February 10th, you will end up paying probably quite a bit more than the amount that we were able to negotiate. And then early bird registration is $400 right now. That ends February 21st. After that, registration will go up to $450. And as you see on the slide, I put the links to the hotel tab on the NTW website and for registration. And I also put them in chat. So if you can either take a screenshot of this, or if you want to go into chat and tap on those links, and then you can save that. But it'll give you more information, and then also gives you the link to instructions on how to register for the hotel and for the workshop. So that is basically all I have. If anybody has any questions, I can take a minute to answer some questions, or I'll also put my email in the chat box so that you guys can email me questions if you have any later.
Are there any questions for Tess? Not seeing any, but Tess, I can say that I'm really excited about this workshop. I'm really hoping that we're able to be there, meet in person safely, and learn a lot about AgrAbility and continue our work with the AgrAbility.
Yeah, thanks. Me too. It'll be nice to be back in person again after 2 years.
Yes, definitely. This is a very exciting workshop. I always look forward to it.
All right, great. Thanks.
Thank you, Tess.
You're welcome.
I just have here a brief snapshot of what the AgrAbility webpage looks like with further information on the AgrAbility National Training Workshop, which, like Tess mentioned, will take place on March 14th through the 17th in Wisconsin. So if you, so just so you know, like when you click on the link, this is more or less what it's going to look like. Next, we have an icebreaker. Since we are on a networking meeting, we wanted to do something to kind of get to know one another a little bit more. So Angelina is going to put us in the Zoom breakout rooms, and these are the things that we want you to share with your group. You want to share your name, your role in your organization, and what organization you are with. If you're a community member, you can also say I'm a community member. And the question today is, what has been your best New Year's resolution? So it doesn't have to be your 2022 New Year's resolution if you didn't make one. Just which one has been the best one? It could be something like drinking water first thing in the morning, seeing the sunrise, volunteering. Which one have you thought was the best New Year's resolution? So Angelina is now going to put us into the Zoom breakout rooms. Back. Okay. I just want to say that we had a really great group in our session. So I hope you guys found this fun. I also even heard some networking outside of WRASAP happening. It was like some networking about a knitting group. So that was great. We had a really neat group. Does anybody want to share some like a New Year's resolution that they think they might take up from what they heard. I heard a really great one, which was knitting to help with anxiety or with just like feeling nervous or having too many things to do. So I might try knitting, but I think I'm only going to succeed in making like long lines because I cannot make shapes, but that will be something. So that's the one that I think I'm going to pick up. Does anybody want to share one really great one that they heard from their group or maybe even their own? Oh, somebody's already saying who it was. Yes, it was her. It was Shannon that knits. Okay, anybody want to share? Oh, breathe intentionally. I'm seeing in the chat that somebody said breathe intentionally. That's a really good one. That is a really good one. All right, if everybody's shy and doesn't want to share, it's okay. We can move on to our next portion. So just trying to. So we're gonna go back to another announcement. This time we're going to have Julie Jesmer from the WRASAP program. She's the coordinator. Shows a little bit about the member portal and the WRASAP webpage.
All right, can everybody see the WRASAP webpage on the screen? Okay. I just wanted to share, first of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Julie. I am the newly hired WRASAP coordinator, and I really, really enjoy this group and this position. It's been diving in with both feet and having a ball doing it. And so my job today is just to kind of show you a little bit about the website, but mostly to talk about the member portal. Now here's the website. I know some of you are probably familiar with it, but take a look. It's really easy, farmstress.us. So you don't need to think through any links or save them or anything, because just type in farmstress.us. And here's the kind of main page. Those videos are awesome, really well professionally done videos that kind of explore what the kind of population that WRASAP is hoping to reach. And then the fun part keeps going here. So here is our clearinghouse. I know some of you have used it before. You can always bring up different, you can select a state. Let's look at Colorado because, you know, that's home for me, even though I live in Washington. Look, here's everything in Colorado, or you can go by a different service. Let's talk about substance abuse in Colorado. And there we go with a couple of resources there. So it's really very user-friendly. But what I'm really interested in showing you is this member portal. You go over here to member login. Now I've already logged in. I've already joined as a member. So my page looks a little bit differently. But if you haven't joined as a member, you go to this member login, and then you can do either the contact form or write an email to info@farmstress and say, I would like to become a member. We will get that information and then see if you qualify. Nearly everybody's going to qualify, especially as community members, because we want to get a hold of community members and spread the news that we're here. But this is where the magic happens. This is the member area after you get your membership login. This is fun, okay? Because right here is the the main page, but here, look at marketing. You have access as a member to the WRASAP logos. You can download them. You can copy paste the funding disclaimer if you have promotional materials that are funded through WRASAP. Look, all these fun photos that are stock photos that you can borrow. And then here are the WRASAP pamphlets. So the pamphlets you can certainly download and present either electronically or hand them out. Talks about all of the different regions on the Farsan regions, and this one's actually about the Western region. So that's available to you. There's network member resources. Now this is similar to the clearinghouse, but this is for members. And so it has more to do with focused on the members and the things that can be there. There are all these tabs. Let me show you a fun one. Look, we have 2 podcasts. Podcasts are available, both the Seeds of Wellbeing podcast, but this Ag Wellness podcast at Utah is just starting. So we've only got 2 episodes uploaded, but keep following. Go to Spotify if you'd like to listen to the Ag Wellness podcast. But the magic continues, because it's not only the podcast, there's evaluation. And I'm so excited about this. Look at this aggregated Western region report. Thank you, Michelle. She's amazing. Michelle's team got this together. This is our baseline report for the survey that was performed with farmers in the Western region. And there's so much data in here that you can read through, think about, share with your teams, share with your organizations, share in your communities. So all of this is available to you just by going to the member login and sending out an email or filling out the contact form saying, let me join. And then you can join and get a whole, have all of this available, all of these available resources for you. So that's all I have for today. But again, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, the people at Utah, for the podcasts. This is an amazing group and so many resources.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was a great resource to share. I'm excited to start utilizing the member portal. Just a reminder that the member portal is for individuals that are collaborating with WRASAP. So if you're a funded project, or if you have applied for a mini grant and received the mini grant, this way you'll have access to the resources, the logos, and all of the information that was shared by Julie. We also like to invite you to share the resources that you have. We'll love to add those into the member portal. And it has, I want to thank Shannon, because she's put in a lot of work to make that happen. And thank you, Shannon. It's looking great. Yeah, I agree. Michelle is saying in the chat that it was a giant team effort. The WRASAP aggregate baseline report. Thanks to everyone that worked on it. If anyone has any questions on it, please let Michelle know. Her and Allison are both the 2 leaders that are in charge of the baseline, collecting data and putting the reports together. So any questions regarding data on the WRASAP baseline surveys can go to Michelle and Allison. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our main presentation for today. Let me just look for our slide.
Are you ready for me to start, Esme?
Not quite yet. Hold on one second. Just 1 second. Okay, so I will now introduce both of our presenters for the presentation that will be provided by Colorado AgrAbility Program. And our first person, or both of our presenters, are going to be tag teaming. First, Dr. Fetch. He has been a longtime AgrAbility staff member as a PI, as a principal investigator of that project, and also has worked with the University Extension, including Colorado State Extension AgrAbility. His expertise lies in family life issues, especially related to resilience and stress. He also works with farm families on topics of stress, depression, and suicidal thinking. He is the leader of the AgrAbility Quality of Life Study, and although he has been retired for a decade, he is still actively working to bring resources to support farm families in the area of mental health. With him today is Chad Reznicek. He is a behavioral health specialist with Colorado AgrAbility Project, and he has committed to helping expand and improve mental health support and resources in rural communities. Prior to joining the AgrAbility team, Chad has spent 20 years as a licensed therapist providing behavioral health services in diverse settings with special focus on areas of suicide prevention, trauma, mood disorders, and substance misuse. Both of Chad's parents were raised on farms and grew up in a small farming community in central Nebraska with a deep respect for agriculture as the heart of our rural communities. So we'll now hear from Dr. Fetch and Chad.
Thank you, Esme, for inviting Chad and me to talk today. It's a real pleasure to meet with all of you today. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about advances and barriers in increasing behavioral health support for not only Colorado farming and ranching families, but for Western states as well. Next slide, please. The vision of AgrAbility is to do what? To enhance the quality of life for farmers, ranchers, and other agricultural workers with disabilities. Why? So that they, their families, and their communities continue to succeed in agriculture. We're in our 15th year of a 14-state study looking at how effective we are at enhancing quality of life. And I'll just give you a couple of highlights. 82% of AgrAbility participants reported improved quality of life levels. On average, our group of 240 AgrAbility participants' quality of life levels improved 26%, and their psychological well-being levels improved 28% with 270 individuals. Next slide, please. What is the purpose of the newly funded WRASAP-funded behavioral health specialist? The purpose is to expand the Colorado AgrAbility Project team. We want to go beyond providing and addressing physical needs of our over 613 clients that we have here in Colorado to expand to deal with behavioral health, preventive education, and referrals to local behavioral health providers. This position was developed through a 3-year grant from the Western Region Agricultural Stress Assistance Program. We deeply appreciate Don McMora, Kate Seymour, NIFA, Farsan, and all of you for helping provide the funding to expand CAP to move into the behavioral health area, because that's a real need. The suicide levels of especially elderly white farmers is 3.7 times the national average. We've got a real problem there. Next slide, please. And here is Chad Reznicek. He's the little guy right behind the steering wheel. Right, Chad?
Yeah, that's me clutching the wheel of that Alice Chalmers there. As Esme mentioned in the introduction, I grew up in a small town in central Nebraska. I was fortunate that majority of our weekends and most summers were spent helping out on my grandparents' farm. And the agricultural values and work ethic have definitely been stuck with me throughout my behavioral health career. And while I haven't until this position, which started for me in May, I haven't focused on agriculture specifically as a population, I think it'd be fair to say that the agricultural values have permeated my approach to mental well-being, my approach to psychology, my approach to working with clients, both in terms of work ethic, valuing individuals, valuing their connection to the larger scope where they live. And I'll also say that there's a bit of the toxic grit that I've had to wrestle with myself too. And that I recognize that I've, sometimes at the sacrifice of time with my family or my own well-being or my own health, have struggled to ask for help when I should have learned to delegate when I was much younger. Things like that I've had to recognize as both, kind of the strengths and the challenges that come from this set of values. But I'm deeply honored to have this position and to have the opportunity to give back to this culture and to this particular group in occupation that means so much for my own well-being, my own set of values and identity, and also that provides so much to us in the rest of the world. So what I wanted to do is give sort of a contextual overview of the grant that supports this position, and then go into some of the specifics of how we've started to flesh out some of these aspects. So year one goals were to identify stress assistance information, education programs, and resources. And I'd say really the bulk of my initial couple months joining the AgrAbility team was doing every possible internet search for farm stress, for rural mental health, for everything I could find to kind of get a sense of the lay of the land and see what's out there, what's being done well, what might be some good methods for being able to evaluate this. So I've tried to catalog as many of those as possible and would be glad to share anything that may be of benefit to people. We're also working to provide 5 Colorado AgrAbility Project winter workshops with the Colorado team. So fingers crossed that the coronavirus and new variants don't get in the way of that. Hopefully we'll be able to take care of those. We've got them scheduled for March to hit different corners and geographical regions of Colorado. We want to disseminate stress assistance information, resources, evidence-based programs, and promote Farm Aid's crisis line as an agriculturally responsive national resource. And then also refer farmers and ranchers to local behavioral health providers. So by virtue of my grant, even though I'm a licensed clinician, I won't be doing direct service, but definitely want to act as a bridge and provide warm handoffs whenever possible to get people connected to the right services at the right time. Our 2-year goals include networking with WRASAP and to provide them with resources, information, education, training, and support for them to assist people in crisis and to assist with making referrals to local behavioral health therapists. And then to offer webinar training consultation annually through these organizations and other Western region stakeholders, behavioral health therapists, and the National AgrAbility Project annually. 3rd-year goals: network with WRASAP state and territory stakeholders like land grant, university extension directors, specialist agents to connect them with information, education, training, and support. To educate their agricultural producers, workers, and families how to assess and use existing behavioral health resources and programs to reduce incidents of individuals and families doing harm to themselves and others. And network with NAP and WRASAP to promote a 4-day national training workshop that incorporates a behavioral health track with a day dedicated to farmland networking objectives. It's open to all professionals interested in working with farming communities, and a 1-day regional workshop on behavioral health in a Western region state that does not have an AgrAbility project. So then lastly, regarding the grant language, the hope is that these activities address the following pitfalls: reduce stigma, especially amongst that really tough demographic, which is 55 plus men tend to struggle with admitting and talking about depression and other behavioral health challenges. We want to keep AgrAbility teams and clients safe from COVID, and we want to follow up with reluctant farmers and ranchers in therapy by providing support and ongoing follow through. As an example of this, we have one of our Colorado AgrAbility clients that was also interested in receiving some behavioral health support. So we worked to figure out kind of what she was looking at, what her goals were, and then we're able to do a warm handoff, pair her up with a provider that we thought would be a good match. And then I provide weekly follow-up with her just to make sure she's meeting her appointment, she's following through with the homework she's being given, and just provide some additional support and encouragement there. Now, so that concludes the grant language. What I really wanted to look at was what is sort of an operational definition of what's expected of me. And so I kind of see that our 3-year mission is to expand and improve behavioral health support for farmers and ranchers and their families throughout the Western region. Now, that's a pretty wide scope, and I acknowledge that. So to be able to find some sense of the forest through the trees and to look at providing some framework for how to begin to go about that, the evaluation concept I've looked at is called the 4 A's: accessibility, awareness, affordability, and acceptability. There's many different iterations of this that are used in terms of assessing pervasiveness of access to medical health initiatives. It's used in marketing, it's used in business. But the idea being that if we want to increase and improve behavioral health for farmers, and also I'll say for the sake of brevity, I'm going to shorten the terms I'm using to specify farmers, but understand it's inclusive for basically all producers of food and fiber. But for the sake of going forward for this presentation, when I say farmers, understand I'm trying to be as inclusive as possible with that. But if we want to increase behavioral health for farmers, We want to look at accessibility, awareness, acceptability, and affordability. And so I really view our role as anything that promotes and increases efforts in those 4 areas helps us to get ultimately where we're trying to go. Now, accessibility is one of the trickier aspects when we talk about behavioral health, especially in rural communities. So mirroring a lot of national trends, Colorado is pretty severely underrepresented for behavioral health providers living in residence in our rural and frontier counties. We do have a number of really good regional behavioral health centers that offer a range of in-person and telehealth services. And broadband accessibility does continue to improve, but there's just simply some logistical challenges, especially around the mountainous regions that really offer no short-term solutions. Towards that end, in looking at the different services that are available in Colorado, we don't know of any current provider structure that allows for services to take place on the farm. And I see that as a notable gap, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. We also recognize in terms of accessibility that navigating insurance options can be tricky, and we want to be able to offer support and assistance for people that are trying to figure out which providers are available through their own networks. As a quick aside, my wife and I are both mental health professionals, and we're needing to find some support for our daughter not too long ago. And even with our backgrounds, trying to navigate who would be an appropriate match in a schedule that wouldn't require my daughter to miss school or work or her activities. There's some challenges that go with that. So if we can help overcome any of those barriers, we definitely want to do that. And then also to provide ongoing stigma appears to be one of the more significant barriers to accessibility, and recognizing that regional health centers that offer increased discretion and privacy tend to increase odds of engagement. I do want to point out the Southeast Health Group as a real blue chip model for accessibility awareness and community collaboration. These guys down in the Southeast region in Colorado have done a fantastic job of developing a real network of community stakeholders that are responsive to the needs of their communities. They do a fantastic job of marketing, of getting information out there, helping to reduce stigma, and really having a lot of innovative programs that really invite people in and get them exposed to resources and support. So just want to recognize those guys are doing a fantastic job. On a national focus, the Minnesota model of ag-specific behavioral health, I think, warrants a little bit of focus. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture has done a real bang-up job of taking a pretty non-traditional approach, and they've funded 2 licensed professionals. Ted Matthews is a psychologist, and he's been doing this for almost 40 years. And then Monica McConkey was relatively recently brought in to help just in terms of capacity. But both of them follow a really non-traditional structure. Their entire purview and objective is to be available for farmers and ranchers by phone. They can set up ongoing telehealth sessions. They can meet with them on farms, but they're not bound by fee-for-service models. They're not bound by medical models or diagnosis. They're really just created in this really great framework that's about being able to meet the needs of farmers and ranchers where they are. And so as a result, I've been fortunate to speak with both of them. They're fantastic in sharing ideas and resources and some of their structure. So in terms of future goals and future program development in other areas within our region, it's a fantastic model to look at if we could secure funding for something like that. So locally then, within Colorado, kind of checking the boxes of accessibility, awareness, and affordability, we have, we have the Colorado Agricultural Addiction and Mental Health Program. They offer a voucher system for 6 free sessions for Colorado farmers, offered by providers that are trained in agricultural competency. They also offer training in agricultural competency. The training program is based heavily on Dr. Rosman's agrarian imperative, and they offer this training for medical providers, mental health providers, a wide range of professionals and stakeholders that already have embedded relationships within our agricultural communities. And then we're partnering with them to develop a curriculum and co-facilitate 4 spring weekend workshops on parenting strategies for teen substance abuse prevention intervention in rural communities. So we have those scheduled to start in February, and we'll conclude those sometime around mid-May. So our 2022 goals for increasing accessibility to those most in need, we're in the very early stages of developing a process for offering support and follow up for farm aid crisis line callers throughout the Western region. So kudos to that team. They're doing some amazing work. And if there's a way that we can offer some support to that, we're definitely looking forward to it. And then again, on a local level, partnering with local crisis hotlines and law enforcement co-responder programs in our rural areas to offer follow-up and resource linking for farm families in crisis. So we do have an existing partnership with El Paso County Sheriff co-responders, and want to look at measuring our capacity and increasing that through the course of the next year, with the idea being that if we can provide some backup and some resource linking to those that are most in need, hopefully we can provide that safety net to get people where they need to go. And then another A, the awareness. We want to seek every opportunity to share information, promote resources, and increase behavioral health literacy. There's a 2020 study published in the Journal of Rural Mental Health. They investigated barriers to help seeking among 140 rural adults, and they found that knowledge of mental illness emerged as the only significant predictor of and was as positively associated with willingness to seek psychological help. What this suggests to me, granted it's a relatively small study, but the more we can do to get information out there, I see this as one of the most effective strategies for combating stigma. And recognizing the incredibly talented and diverse sets of skills and profiles that are encapsulated within this WRASAP group. I just really want to encourage and thank everyone that works so hard to get information out there and promote that behavioral health literacy. So thanks to all of you for your amazing efforts around that. One small section of that, by virtue of the WRASAP small grant funding, I was able to get certified as a Train the Trainer in COMMET, which is changing our mental and emotional trajectory. This is meant to complement things like QPR and mental health first aid. It's a model, it's a skills-based model, teaching people how to have those hard conversations when you recognize that someone's struggling. And so the good thing about it is it's very efficient in that 2 hours you can get people trained and hopefully up to speed and comfortable with this particular process. So I just received that certification in mid-December and want to begin to look at opportunities to promote and provide some of that into the year ahead. Another thing around awareness, there's some really great resources out there that compile all the different programs and practices and initiatives to support farm stress and rural behavioral health. But one of the nonprofit ones I've found that's really good is Rural Minds. And I won't read their mission there, it's there for everyone. But they're in the process of considering whether or not they could build out a section that would provide specific resources for mental health providers that are serving in rural communities, because I've not found anything like that. And I found a lot of great resources that I want to be able to share. One of them, I've posted the link right there, it's called CALM. This is Counseling on Access to Lethal Means. And this is a 2-hour online presentation and about one of the best returns you could ask for 2 hours, because it gives you specific skills and examples of how to have conversations about access to lethal means and firearms. So we know specifically for our rural communities and those that are at risk for suicide, that access to firearms just skyrockets that risk level. And so for anyone working in rural situations and may come into contact with people in crisis, I highly recommend that resource. And can I check in real quick? Are there any questions so far?
So far, we don't have questions, just a comment. Somebody, Allison, thanking you for sharing this encouraging findings for everyone who does mental health literacy work.
Great, cool, thank you so much. And so then lastly, acceptability. And this has to do with promoting agriculturally informed and responsive care. And what this really comes down to for me is that I imagine the gravity and the responsibility that sits on the shoulders of that social worker or therapist, that once a farmer or their family member does get in front of them, the responsibility to make sure that we're engaging well and connecting in a way that validates who they are and what they do and the uniqueness of their situation, both their strengths and their challenges. I think that's huge. And we want to make sure that if we do get someone that's got the courage and ability to get in for that first session, that they feel encouraged to come back for the second one. And so one of the ways we want to do that is by really developing some clinical practices that are geared towards meeting farmers and ranchers where they are and really meeting their needs. And as kind of a quick aside, the way this came about for me, I've got this title up here, Brofenbrenner's Ecological Systems Theory. One of the models that I worked out of relatively early on in my career was called multi-systemic therapy. And this is an evidence-based model where you're working primarily with the families of at-risk teens, and you're meeting them in their homes, with the idea being that you can really only understand the individual by understanding the environment they exist in. And so I was really fortunate through the course of that work to help me understand how crucial it is to see the individuals we work with within that broader context. And so the idea is to promote what's called ecological validity. The basic assumption being that behavior can only be fully understood when it's viewed within its naturally occurring context. And so the way that, that this really was driven home for me was working with a gang-involved youth who, that we had a meeting at a school, and the identified client is a gang-involved youth who's already on his third strike. His probation officer and his case manager are threatening to send him to jail, basically, if he doesn't stop getting into fights. And so he just had another one now on his way to school that day for the meeting. And so people are calling his behavior self-sabotage. But until they were able to take a step back and look at that kid had to walk through 4 blocks of opposition territory to get to school. If you're not taking that piece into account, you're missing something pretty huge. And so that need to expand the vision and really look at how do we understand the individual within the environment that they exist in, that's what it comes down to in my mind in terms of providing responsive care and quality care and culturally adapted care. So towards that end, working to develop a clinical model called land logic. And we're taking evidence-based cognitive behavioral therapy techniques and action commitment therapy techniques and adapting them in terms of language, renaming, metaphors, things of that nature, to be hopefully as viable, appropriate, and meaningful to farming and ranching families as possible. So kind of the fundamental premise with this is the notion of the aerial photo. So the young lady in this picture is Kayla Anderson. She's the founder of Land Logic, and she had this concept of looking at the aerial photo as being this fantastic encapsulation of the agrarian imperative and everyone that exists within that snapshot. And so started looking at that from that ecological perspective in terms of providing behavioral health services, and began to see the value of that, both in terms of, or actually in terms of assessment, engagement, and clinical enlistment. So within context, inviting producers to bring a representation, and we say representation because we've also looked at how to have people just draw out a representation of their land. And I'll back up for just a second. In the interest of being transparent, I recognize that this is somewhat perhaps geographically more of a Midwestern value in Midwestern application in terms of the aerial photo. But I do think in terms of just the larger agrarian imperative, having an idea of the representation of the person's land and how they operate within that land has a much larger universal value. So with context, in terms of inviting someone to bring that photo or to use that representation as a starting point, our hope is that it conveys cultural humility. It's an honoring and interest in that individual's operation, their own individual stressors and resources. It also provides a common frame of reference for provider and clients. And again, it allows that provider a unique perspective into the client's ecological system. One of the things we've heard from producers that have sought out behavioral health services is the frustration if you have to spend 20 minutes of a session just kind of explaining your operation and everything that goes into it. And so while often that's going to be an essential part of it, we want to do it in a way that's honoring and building. And we feel like being able to use that aerial photo as a good jumping off place is a great way to establish those steps. We also see it as a bridge between client experience and therapeutic concepts and interventions. So it's a fantastic context for learning and introducing CBT and ACT concepts. There's rich opportunities for value clarification and evaluation, rich sources of analogies for a wide range of therapeutic applications. And then especially the potential for designing individualized, relevant, and practical homework and interventions. So knowing a person's lay of the land, having, the honor of having them kind of walk us through what a typical day looks like, where they spend the bulk of their time, what part of that, what aspect within that image and within that land do they feel most connected? Do they have a sense of purpose and meaning? And what areas where they may struggle, that gives us a chance to really tailor what we're asking them to do in terms of their activities and their interventions to make it relevant and hopefully give them a renewed connection to their own land and to their own operation. Additionally, then we're just looking at some other, we want to make this very practical for providers in terms of offering tools. And so we've created, in cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the sort of go-to interventions is understanding cognitive distortions. The idea being that it's not so much what life throws at us, it's how we think about what life gives us that we can influence and to determine our emotional well-being. And so cognitive distortions play a role in that. We've created 10 cognitive distortions that we call barbed wire thinking. Some of these are typical for cognitive behavioral therapy, but we've really tried to work in agricultural themes, and we vetted this and worked on getting feedback from producers and coming up with examples and illustrations of this that seem meaningful and seem to have relevance to their experiences as well. So that's just a quick example of one of the tools that goes along with this. Our hope is that starting in hopefully March that we'll be able to offer free training for clinicians in this particular model, offering them the tools, the handouts, the worksheets, things like that. And so we've done a couple trial runs with some different places and had really good feedback. And so we're looking forward to getting that into definitely not a finished product, but hopefully the first edition, and we'll continue to expand and grow upon that as we get feedback and as we get chances to hear from people whether they see it's valuable or not. And ultimately, that's what I have for today. I appreciate everyone's time and attention, and especially just want to thank you all for your dedication to help support this most noble of occupations, and especially those incredible families that give so much back to the world through agriculture. So for all of you that have your boots on the ground and are doing your work day in and day out to help provide that support for these families, just thank you. And I'm deeply honored to be able to play my small part. And if there's anything we can do to help prevent people from reinventing the wheel or to share ideas or share resources, we definitely want to do that. So thank you all very much.
And I just want to pick up on thank you, Chad, for your presentations today. And for those of you who are in SRAPs in the Western region, Alaska, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Washington, not only can Chad provide you with resources like the many of which he provided in the last 30 minutes, but also for those of you who are having trouble, when you recognize a client that is stressed out, angry, depressed, or suicidal, how do you make an effective referral to a local behavioral health person? If you need help doing with that, call Chad, email Chad. He can help you make that connection and get them in to help.
Thank you, Bob. Thank
you both, Dr. Fetch, Chad, for your efforts in incorporating this clinician part into the AgrAbility programs in the West. We're very excited to see what will come out of your workshops. Hopefully they happen in the spring. As we know, we're playing everything by ear, but it's very exciting to see the work that you have. Chad has put in the chat his contact information. And I'm just kind of going through to see if I see any questions. If anybody has a question and would like to unmute, you can do that too. Right now, I just don't see any in the chat, but like I said, if anybody would like to unmute, you can do that. I will also share with you that, as mentioned by Tess earlier today in the National AgrAbility Training Workshop, which is expected to take place on March 14th through 17th, Chad has a session that will be much more in depth than what he went over today. So if anybody's attending, that is an opportunity for you to connect with Chad, talk to Dr. Fetch if needed. So yeah, I just wanted to remind you on that. I don't see any more questions, so I'm gonna move on. I also have this created this space in here just to take any comment. If anybody has any comments about any of the presentations or announcement today, please feel free to bring those forward. This is a space for us to network, to get to know each other, to build community. So I wanted to make sure that we had this opportunity for everybody to get a chance to voice their questions or just any comments. Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions or comments. We can continue. So I just wanted to briefly mention some upcoming farm stress related events to the network. Our partners at Oregon State University are having some QPR trainings coming up. Training dates are for February 2nd, April 6th, and June 15th. And they also have sessions in Spanish on January 27th, March 17th, May 12th, and June 16th. You can find this information at their webpage, which is listed on here, or also you can go to farmstress.us and go on to the events, and you will also be able to find the information on there. Just some closing comments. I wanted to remind everybody that the small grants opportunity is open for our second year, the first quarter of the second year. You can provide or submit applications under the 3 categories, which are outreach, professional development, and also translation. The mini grants can go up to $10,000, but if you have a larger project, you can email us to voice that, and the small grants can also support larger projects. We also want you to invite you to join our network and invite other colleagues to join these meetings and join the listserv on the farmstress.us webpage. You can find it by scrolling down on the Get the Latest News and Updates box. And also, to, like I said, to sign up to our newsletter, and remember that this meeting is open for everybody. We don't have a set meeting time for the next meeting, but as you know, these are quarterly. So in about a quarter, we'll have another one of these meetings. Before that, everybody that registered today and has previously registered will get an announcement of what is of what's coming up. Okay. So lastly, I just want to thank you all for being here, for listening, and for all of the work that you guys are doing to help farmers and farm workers and help them find the resources to continue farming and to get help in times of stress. Thank you all very much.